This is an extremely difficult task. So the hard bit is to get the entanglement over large distances. Things are progressing extremely well, and this will happen at some point soon. But this is a very difficult technological challenge, and there's also some science challenges coming in, and there's still...
The most interesting is what do you define as soon?
Oh, these questions are dangerous.
We have Jens Eisert from Berlin, aus Berlin. Thank you for joining us. Let's use this time for you to introduce yourself a little bit more, add more points to yourself.
My name is Jens Eisert. I live in Berlin. I also enjoy the weather. I actually went ice skating on Sunday.
Is it as cold as Riga right now?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm a researcher interested in quantum computing, and I'm a bit of a veteran in the field in the sense that I had been working on quantum computing already before it was cool. Now it's cool, and I'm still excited about this. And yeah, that gives me a bit of background in the field. That gives an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Maybe another thing, and yes, I do work at the Freie Universität Berlin. Yeah. I also have like secondary jobs at Helmholtz and Fraunhofer for multiple reasons. I personally like to work in mathematical terms. I'm a kind of rigorous guy. When there's something, there's a norm around this and a right-hand side. I like to prove sample complexity bounds, guarantees and so on. I'm mathematically minded and trained. At the same time, I like to solve problems. Like I have a Swedish mother, which gives me a bit of pragmatism.
So cutting through the hype.
I work in rigorous terms. I like to connect findings to schemes that exist, to experimental data, to things that work. And this is kind of a niche thing in that there's not so many people doing like mathematics for reality. That's kind of the place where I see myself. And yeah, that has been working well so far, and I have been contributing over the years a lot of material to what we can do with quantum computers, but also what we maybe cannot do with quantum computers to kind of guide the field a little bit.
From this year's QIP, maybe just as a warm-up question, what do you think would be something would you say is maybe cutting through the hype, or like an uncomfortable thing to say for the general, let's say, conference team this year?
Well, I mean, for the conference, a bit too early. Now we have Tuesday morning. Much of the conference is still coming. Also, I'm not sure I agree with cutting through the hype, because I don't think there's much hype here. I think that's a good thing about QIP, and that it's a very much it's a very mathsy and a bit of a geeky conference. It's become massive in size, but if you want to get accepted here, you have to have a strong technical result. It's heavily reviewed, and it's actually not hypey at all. It's like really hard technical material. If anything, it's a bit biased towards like very computer sciencey topics and not very much on experimental topics. But I think it's good to have this focus. But no, I don't think there's much hype here. I think that's really the charm of
but
QIP.
maybe in general in the quantum information field, let's say.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, even though there is a bit of a cultural gap between different sub-communities and so on, I think one also should not like mix up being excited with hyping things. Like I tend to be excited too. Like as I said, I'm a veteran in the field, but I'm as excited about quantum computing as I was in the early 0 years. And when I put out a paper, I'm super excited about this. But that's not the same thing as hyping. Hyping means you make promises that will be hard to fulfill and so on. And well, there's not much hype going on in this room, in this building at the moment. At the same time, I think it's fair to say that we are an interesting stage in the field at the moment, and also that we have achieved a lot. I mean, of course, over the last 20 years, but then also a lot over the last 5 years. I mean, but the point I'm trying to make is there's still a lot to come.
What would you say is the main driver for the last 5 years? Is it hardware acceleration?
Okay, I mean, there's different players who drove things differently at different stages. So I mean, the idea of quantum computing is not new. I mean, already in the 80s, Benioff, Feynman and Deutsch were kind of contemplating what would happen if quantum systems were carriers of information. And then it was a hugely inspiring field since surely the mid-90s.
Yeah.
I mean, quantum error correction came up in the mid-90s. Shor's algorithm is from the mid-90s. And I mean, that was good enough as a highly inspiring theoretical field, and a lot of stuff span out of that.
But Shor's also has real-world applications right now.
That's
for
right.
security and encryption.
I mean, it also had like real-world applications. I mean, if you say come up with new quantum-inspired tensor network algorithms, I mean, that's a quantum application, if you want.
Yeah.
But now, the kind of the phenomenon that like protagonists actually set out to build such machines to a reasonable scale, that's a relatively new phenomenon from the last 6-7 years or so. And that's a new development, and that's giving the field a lot of impetus and push. And that's maybe what you are referring to, in that only in the last years, half a decade or so, quantum machines have been built that are not quite fault-tolerant quantum computers yet, but that are already at a stage, at a size, at a scale where you think, oh, that's interesting. Now, what can we do with it? And that gives the field a kind of a new momentum and new scope.
What would you say?
Then there's yet another time scale. I mean, if you take subfields like quantum error correction, this has completely skyrocketed in the last year, I would say, with results coming in from like this real-time decoding, where you have a superconducting chip, you take data, and then you put the data to a supercomputer, you do the decoding in real time, you feed it back, and then you make corrections, and then you do this a million times. I mean, like, whoa. This was new, or what they called atoms, shuttling things around. That was mostly driven by US players, but now there's also European players coming in to do exciting work along this line. This is something that has happened in the last year or so.
And so do you think this will just accelerate with maybe even more people going into the industry, since it is considered the next frontier? Let's say you are doing some AI related work, or I don't know, cryptography work, or anything which is, let's say, considered modern in computer science or the field, and then you just go to quantum, and it's basically the ultimate end.
I mean, this is like a bit of a dangerous territory in the sense that I mean, the momentum is like super high. I mean, like the first derivative of development is high, and there's strong evidence for this. I mean, I'm not making this up. Now you are saying like, where's this going? And where this comes, there's many answers to that. One thing is like a bit of like a market expectation, but that is related to kind of hype, that's related to consumer expectations, to company expectations. We are well advised to keep the momentum up and keep like a down-to-earth attitude, and just keep our development. Because you mentioned this mind the gap. I mean, I don't think I'm most well known for a single article. I hope.
No, I mean, I didn't want to say that, but this is maybe a very, very interesting.
But sure. A point we are trying to make here is that the field has been developing very rapidly, but there's still a big jump from the near-term world. You said you dropped the term NISQ. That's kind of much.
That's where we are right now, right? And
that's where we are at the moment, and then people want to go to the fault-tolerant application scale regime,
FASQ,
the FASQ regime, and one has to be aware that there's quite big gaps between that. Like what we do now and a full fault-tolerant quantum computer is. This gap is
but do you
quite
think
large.
that science has to work together with the private sector more to go to FASQ or reach FASQ faster?
Let's do one after the other.
Let's do this.
First, I mean, there's more than one gap. I mean, in our article that you've just mentioned, we are like singling out 4 different fields that we find particularly important, namely error mitigation in the widest possible definition of the term, then quantum error correction, then quantum algorithms, and then quantum simulation, being related to quantum algorithms, but we deliberately took it as a separate field, and we kind of discussed the gaps, like where we are at the moment, then where we want to go, and then also some intermediate points of what we can do to connect it to limits. So I think it's good to be aware of the big gaps we still have, so that we don't create the expectation that tomorrow we have a fault-tolerant quantum computer. At the same time, lots of things have happened, and we should be also aware of where we stand. Now you said another thing, which brings in a meta level, namely should industry and academia work more closely together. This is one of the many meta levels. Maybe let me single out two meta levels, if I may. Like I'm doing this in real time. So one meta level is that I think we are too much driven by fashions and narratives, which sometimes can be a good thing, but sometimes it's also a bit overdone. Maybe there's a bit of a provocative statement. Say take NISQ, you mentioned the term, and for some time, people were like overly excited about like variational quantum algorithms. We have a small circuit in the center. You have like various parameters. You take data, and then you update the data accordingly, the circuit accordingly. This is a compelling prescription. It's not an easy prescription if you think about it, because you have to take lots of data to estimate gradients. There's some methods that work that have a pretty stiff sample complexity. There's even rigorous bounds for the full thing. What are lower bounds for the sample complexity? It's pretty stiff. And then there's lots of stuff on dequantization, what happens to noise, and then how the gradients look like, whether there's barren plateaus, and how do you warm start, and so on. So people were overly excited about this. Now I think they are like underly excited about this, in the sense that people said, oh, this is not going to work. Well, let's see. I mean, also sometimes people, to my taste, are a little bit overly pessimistic about the near-term regime, say, oh, we have to go fault-tolerant. In that, of course, it's good to go fault-tolerant. And we have to take steps, but we haven't fully explored the full potential of the near-term regime either. So I think it's good to be aware of the gaps, but it's also good to be not too much driven by too much of the hype cycles. Then you mentioned the other thing, and that's the second meta point I wanted to make is, should academia and industry work more closely together? I think maybe no, because I think this interaction is already very fruitful. I think there's very few fields where this interaction is so fruitful and also so unaggressive. I was mentioning earlier, like I was 3 QRPs ago, I was out, there was this one evening, I had dinner with Hartmut Neven, like the head of Google Quantum AI, and then with Fernando Brandao, was once my student in the past, but then he's now a bigwig at Amazon. Terry Rudolph, one of the founders of PsiQuantum. Simone Severini, the head of the Amazon efforts at the time. And so at the table, and then Frank Verstraeten and myself. And we were like the dinosaurs at academia, like ha ha ha, the old academic people. And that was a kind of a nice, jokey evening, but I think what people said at the time, that academia will completely evaporate and has no value, everything will be done in industry, that has not happened, even though a lot is happening in industry. And so there's some things that can only be done at the big players' places. I mean, we just heard a wonderful talk in the morning. I mean, that type of stuff is really difficult in academia if you don't have like one big crowd working on a topic, but there's still space for academia. In fact, talking to Google, like we did this nice work on Hamiltonian learning and calibrated the Sycamore chip. This was done in academia with and for Google, but with an academic team, and there's a good reason like why academia came into play. So I think this development and this kind of mode of working is highly symbiotic, and it's quite productive, and people also move back and forth from academia to industry, and I think that's a good thing. I think overall the workflow is quite good, well off, and also industry and academia is, I would say, playing together quite nicely.
Would you say, on a more meta level, even it's about incentive structures, and that the incentive structures right now are placed well, and if we add more incentives to, let's say, industry, we would maybe push too aggressively for some short-term games which are maybe not going to happen, and then people get disillusioned or disenfranchised, and they basically just the hype dies or something, or do you believe that the incentive structure as it is right now is set correctly?
Okay, that's the meta level. So there's also a meta level, which is like how are like outside bodies like changing the figures of merit to kind of guide this kind of process. So overall, There's a couple of things to be said about this. First, yes, we are absolutely well advised to steer away from the hype.
Yeah.
We should not make claims that we cannot keep up with. I think that we build dangerous. I mean, there's these famous hype cycles. If we make ridiculous claims, this will backfire. Now, have ridiculous claims been made? Yes. Well, I'm not giving you names, like not too late for that, but we know of players, and this is mild bias, I would say, to the industry that made claims that were too loud and that were very
like
difficult
millions of qubits
to substantiate.
Like
yeah, it's not only about the system size, because big systems are easier to obtain than you might think, but it's all about quality of gates and control. And yes, people have exaggerated a little bit. Yeah. So that's kind of dangerous, and we should be careful about of this. Overall, I think the community is doing quite well, and also like the big industry players are usually not overdoing things in this respect. I think it's not quite fair to say that industry is overhyping all the time. That's not the case, and there's very responsible players who really invest a lot of time, thought, and money into these things, and they make really substantial efforts and they deliver progress, which is hugely interesting. I mean, also here at QRP, we hear lots of stuff of that type. I think that's very serious work, and it's not overhyped. Yeah. So yes, we should not be hyping. People have been doing this, but not everybody, and it's good to be moderate in expectation. Yeah. Then second, are the incentives right? Well, that's difficult to answer because there's different incentives. Companies have their own incentive. And that's even different from company to company. Absolutely. Like some companies, I mean, like they're making revenues with this, right? I mean, they sell cloud services, whatever. They have like products and so on. Others, they have no products. And they're basically just cashing in the promise that this might work in the long time. Maybe they want to place themselves as being technology leaders. And that's all legitimate and a good thing. Yeah. But there's not one incentive. I think overall, we all want to make quantum computing work. That's the mother or the father of all incentives. But the micro incentives are quite different from player to player. Now, academia is yet different in that, well, it's kind of multifaceted. Take my institution, for example. Like, I'm at FU Berlin, which is like, in principle, one of the prestigious places in Germany. We are among the visible and creative groups in the field. It's fair to say, like we always have good ideas. We publish papers about this. I mean, judge for yourself. But I think it's fair to say that we are producing a consistent body of relevant work and have been doing so over the years. I hope that's not too arrogant to say. At the same time, like we are in a publicly funded German place. So if you want to publish at the level of Google and IBM, of course you have to work hard, and it's a bit of a struggle. I mean, we are doing quite well, but that brings in kind of new challenges. Like my incentive is just doing good work. If I talk to my head of admin, I did this recently at my university. I asked him, "Do you actually know what I'm doing?" He said, "No, I have no clue." And then I gave him some examples. He's like, "Oh my God, you're doing this?" I said, "Yeah, do you not know?" And like even what percentage we have in Nature articles in our whole physics department. And he had no clue. And that's also a good thing because these people don't care, which means on a positive note, I hope that doesn't sound arrogant, but on a positive note, it's nice in that there's just no bibliometric pressures or so. In fact, nobody cares. We can do whatever we want, and like our own motivations are like the incentive. Yeah. You can also do like crazy stuff. Like in January, I wrote a little single author paper on something that's completely not high tech, not timely. It's like nerdy. I was even scooped on much of the main result. It's like really off everything. But in academia, you can still do this as a side thing. Yeah. Nobody says, "Oh, why are you doing this?" And that's also nice in that the academic incentives are a bit broader. You still have funders, and they can be quite direct in what they want to see. But if you keep the balance right and deliver to them what they want to get, you have quite a lot of freedom, and also more so as in the quantum industry, it seems fair to say. So the upshot is, I think the incentives are overall right. We should not hype. Be careful. Keep hype down. And we should be well motivated. We have all reasons in the world to all the reasons in the world to be excited. But we also should be aware of the fact that the incentives are multifaceted and not the same thing for different players in industry, with yet different many facets like within industry and academia.
Okay, quantum machine learning. What is that?
Oh, that's again not one field. It's more than one field. It's kind of it's an agglomerate of fields that explore the intersection of learning tasks and quantum computing, and that's a very natural question. I mean, given that machine learning is changing the world we live in, it's very difficult to deny. Quantum computing has proven algorithmic advantages over classical algorithms. Of course, people should responsibly think of what you can do with quantum computers in machine learning. But there's lots of contact points. People think of how to use machine learning to optimize quantum computers. Even in the Google talk this morning, there was a side remark on
we talked about it yesterday with the team, and they definitely use AI.
On how to use AI in contraction of tensor networks to do this. Of course, everybody uses that. I mean, how many times have you used ChatGPT today? I mean, I stopped counting.
More than I should.
More than you should. That's yet another topic, but let's maybe not go there. So clearly there's an intersection point, but the more delicate intersection point is, of course, the one where you say, can quantum computing help in actually speeding up tasks?
That's what I would say. That's what maybe the audience also understands as QML.
Yeah, exactly. So to be fair, it's also a bit rebranding itself. People are more and more moving into learning tasks and rebrand this as QML. But you're right in that the core question is of QML is like, can we find quantum algorithms for machine learning? And there's a lot to be said. And I maybe say four things and then I make a meta point. There's interesting things to be said in the sense that there are proven separations. I mean, there are settings where quantum learners can provably do better than classical learners with a super polynomial separation. That's nice. Been there, done that. These applications are not about pictures of cats and dogs, not about real data. It's good, but it's not the end of the story. Then can you find quantum algorithms that relate to real life problems in machine learning where there's a quantum advantage, or there's good evidence of a quantum advantage in a meaningful way? The answer is again yes, in the sense that, for example, there's quantum training algorithms for large-scale classical networks that have a speed up over families of classical training algorithms. Good, but that's for classical networks. You can say, is there quantum advantages for actual quantum algorithms that relate to classical data in machine learning, say in generative modeling? And yet the answer is yes, in that there is families of diffusion probabilistic models with a forward diffusion process, a sampling process, and a backward one that you can train, where there's strong evidence that you can do this quantumly better than classical. This is all for like universal and fault-tolerant quantum computers. Are there near-term quantum advantages? And again, the answer is yes. You can set up quite crazy PAC learning problems where a constant depth quantum learner can do better than log depth classical. So the upshot is there's the holy grail in the center saying, do we have quantum advantages for realistic, noisy, real-life problems sitting there? And we come closer from all different directions, but we are not there yet. So the answer is, who knows, but it's an interesting development, and it has been interesting over the years. The meta point is yet a similar one that I made earlier, in that we should stay a little bit away from the hype cycles. So like variational quantum machine learning has been a bit overhyped in the past, in the sense that people thought, oh, you just do some like data, like a re-uploading circuit, and you take data, and then you beat classical neural networks. That's not so easy, in particular as a moving target, because as we all know, classical machine learning is quite powerful as well. So, I mean, what are you trying to do?
Who would have thought if you put like a football-sized field full of...
That's kind of not so easy. So people have been like pushing expectations that were unrealistic. At the same time, it's still an interesting question. And I mean, even yesterday, I overheard over the poster session with one friend and leader in QML said, oh yeah, now I'm out of QML, I'm doing something else. I said, yeah, I mean, it's good to be open, and I also work on many fields, and I try to be at the forefront of research in many directions. But I don't think that the race of on the question of can quantum computers help speeding up learning tasks, that question has not been resolved yet, and I think we are well advised to work hard to settle that question. So the upshot is it's a difficult moving target. It's not easy, but there is scope for quantum computers to help tackling learning tasks and we better find out, because at the end of the day, this is one of the more practical, industrially minded problems that we still have in mind where quantum computers could eventually do better than classical computers. So giving that up would be quite irresponsible.
So we talk often about the quantum internet, and maybe that's like a term used here or in the industry. Would you say that we are considering the quantum internet as something if entanglement was a free resource we can obtain, and we should maybe think about it differently, since verifying or using entanglement can be computationally expensive? Or would you say that will the quantum internet be fundamentally harder to achieve than we assume?
Oh, that's again many questions in one. It's difficult to be sure, but I try my very best. When you talk about the quantum internet, that's like more of a communication task than a computational task. Now, roughly speaking, what a quantum internet is about is like having like a network, what is a worldwide network of nodes that are, most of which don't have to be trusted. There's a kind of repeater stations in the middle, and then you kind of have a network that allow for some elements of computation, but primarily like secure communication on the planetary scale. That's surely a very compelling application.
Yeah, and I think many nation states would like to have that.
Right. Now that's clearly an extremely interesting application. Now you said, are people thinking entanglement is too easy to get? I think nobody...
Or cheap, as cheap to get. Maybe not easy, but
or
cheap.
cheap. Yeah. Nobody really actively working in the field would kind of subscribe to that, and that the core, I mean, like running a quantum communication scheme is not difficult. In fact, Charlie Bennett is like one of the veterans in the field, and I was once visiting the Yorktown Heights Watson lab, and I was at a conference, and then Charlie brought me back to his office. I said, I have to show you something. And then he showed me his experiment of BB84. He was not only the inventor of the scheme, but he actually did a first experiment, and he showed me the original thing he did in his tiny office in this IBM research lab with photons and so on. And it's quite astounding. Not many people know this, but it's still there. It's under the...
Like we will say that the physics are not a constraint anymore, but
that's my point. I mean, the scheme itself is very, very easy. I mean, but to run like a quantum repeater scheme is monstrously complicated, because you clearly communicate with light, and light operates at the speed of light, obviously, but then it also operates at certain frequencies that you don't like so much when you want to couple light with...
That's a good point.
Matter.
Light operates at the speed of light.
And then there's like frequency conversion problems coming in. There's matter qubits. You have to do operations on matter qubits and bring it back to light. This is an extremely difficult task. So the hard bit is to get the entanglement over large distances. I mean, and the rest is relatively easy. So this is a very...
What's the path to that? What would you recommend from your perspective? What's the path to achieve that? What would be the requirements for us?
This is a multifaceted thing. I mean, many people work very hard on the different components of realizing quantum repeaters, and all these components have been realized. I mean, frequency conversion, mapping of light to qubits, and matter qubits to light, and manipulation. I mean, things are happening at an enormous scale. There's many also big networks in the world that do that. Like the European one, there's American activities. There's like in Japan, there's a big activity. Things are progressing extremely well, and this will happen at some point soon. But this is a very difficult technological challenge, and there's also some science challenges coming in, and there's still...
The most interesting is what do you define as soon?
Oh, these questions are
subjective, right?
dangerous. I mean, my friend Seth Lloyd was recently giving a talk on my invitation at the German quantum program, and he was asked, when do we have universal quantum computers? And he said, 10 years from now, plus minus never. But then like the audience laughed, the funders made a bit of an irritated facial expression.
Yeah.
But they said, yeah, don't worry so much, because 10 years ago I said 20 years from now, plus minus never. So at least I'm consistent with my prediction. So this is hard to say. We'll see. But I think I think a good figure of merit with all of this. Will this happen within our lifetime? And I think the answer is surely yes.
Okay,
and
that
then
is
there's
good.
fine print on the.
Yeah. What interests me is maybe I have a lack of imagination in that regard, but let's assume we achieve it, whatever, in 10 years, 20 years. I mean, it doesn't matter when we achieve it in the context of other technologies, but let's assume it's around 10 years. What would fundamentally change for the average Joe in his life once we would have like a, let's say, planetary scale network, quantum internet, let's call it like this?
Okay, that's a difficult question again. Maybe let me end this or say something about it with a quote. I'm not quoting this. I mean, I would have to read this properly to properly quote this. But at the end of our article that you've mentioned, like that John Preskill and myself wrote, we had a kind of cute statement that basically makes the point that we have compelling applications, but the most interesting applications will come once we have the device ready. Mm-hmm. And that the most interesting applications are those that seem furthest away from our realm of knowledge now, and that once we have devices, then we can make progress to these really interesting applications. And that's really the perfect way to end our article, because it's very forward-looking, but also makes the point that a lot is to come once we have the device. Yeah. And the joke with this statement is, it's actually not about quantum computing. It's by John von Neumann, written in 1945 about classical computing. There was at the time, I mean, in 1941, there was the SUSE Z1 and Z3 machine built in Berlin, in the Schöneberg living room by Konrad Zuse, with friends coming in, and he was still living with the parents, and he was actually building this machine in the living room. I don't know whether you've seen it. There's a replica in the Berlin Science Museum. It's absolutely unbelievably complicated and complex. And this one dude built this in a living room in Berlin in 41.
They were the real OGs.
Yeah. And then this was the early time of classical computing. And John von Neumann, one of the geniuses of theoretical computer science, already anticipated all the applications coming later. And it's kind of cute to see that in quantum computing, we are now at a stage more or less where we were with classical computing in the 1940s. And that gives us a very promising and forward-looking perspective, and that, well, in a way that we have good reasons to believe that the best is yet to come. With the quantum internet, I mean, of course, the first application is secure communication. And there's many ways why we would want this. And in a world that's increasingly complex, increasingly insecure, increasingly complicated in many ways. I mean, let's not go into politics, but I think many people would see the world now as being more volatile than, say, 20 years ago, where people went, like all
especially
economies went more into a more prosperous direction, like no democracies would go into war. And so I think the world today is more challenging, I would say. I mean, I would try to be not going to politics publicly, but I think in such a world, having an instrument like that is a helpful instrument. But with great power comes great responsibility. Of course, we have to make sure that these powers are also responsibly used, and that are not side effects that are not what we want to see. So overall, of course, people can say, oh, do we kind of create new challenges? Of course we do. But overall, I'm quite positive towards technology. If you take the computer, I mean, of course the computer has changed the world. I mean, you have like this little stick, there's a computer here, there's a computer there, there's a computer there. I mean, it's impossible to deny that our modern world has been changed so much with the advent of a computer. The internet, I mean, this is the single biggest thing that has happened in the last 50 years. I mean,
for sure.
That's difficult to deny. I mean, take the car, okay, sure, it's a bit of a...
I mean, but the car
has also changed the world. But I mean, not even the car has changed the world in the same way as the computer has changed the world.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think for the better. Of course, you can say there's new risks coming. I mean, kids use the internet too much, in the social media. I mean, I have a child myself, so of course, yes, we should be responsible. We should think about these things. But I think overall, most good things should be used in moderation. And the same holds for technology. And if used in moderation, I think it's a good thing. And if used in moderation and in the right context, quantum computers will be a good thing. And the quantum internet will also be a good thing. I'm positive about technology, but we should not be naive, and we should not think that bad players cannot use it. We better think about this now.
And how do we, like, maybe to close this segment, how do we prepare for this future? Should we already advise to change encryption schemes, let's say from elliptic curve encryption to lattice-based encryption to everyone? What's kind of the game plan? Like, we know, like, the idea is we know it's going to happen. We don't know when, but since we know it's going to happen, we better be prepared, especially if you have some sensitive data or something.
Maybe yes. I mean, maybe I'm not the best person to answer that question, because it's multifaceted and not just a mathematical question. For example, a big hardware provider of computers with the address Infinity Loop 1, related to the product that we have in front of us, recently advertised that their chat system that has a vowel at the beginning is now encrypted with a method that's post-quantum secure.
Yeah.
I was flabbergasted to see this. I said, whoa, I mean, they're not using RSA anymore, but they have a different encryption scheme to be safe.
Yeah.
Why is it interesting? Well, it's interesting in so many ways. First, they're already aware of it. That's already cool. Second, they think we should do something about this. That's also cool.
Yeah.
But then you say, why are they doing this? Are they doing this because they really think that like quantum computers that can break RSA encryption are really around the corner? There's this beautiful article by Greg Gibney who kind of estimated the number of qubits, like a million noisy qubits should be good enough for...
But the new number, I did a check, the new number with more assumptions of optimized algorithms, if we don't just use traditional shorts, could also be 300,000.
No, indeed. I mean, and also there was this this wonderful article by my colleague from FU Berlin, but Daniel Litinsky on magic state distillation not being as costly as you think. Yeah. So it's our job to bring down these overheads by factors. And yes, quantum factoring is not around the corner, but it's also not in the infinite future. This will happen at some point.
Especially since we have AI systems which also accelerate the development timeline.
Exactly. So a couple of things to be said. First, why is Apple doing this? I think Apple is not, I said it, but never mind. They're not doing this because they think it's an immediate threat, but they just want to be cool. And that's also a good thing, because I mean, like, this stuff is also about being at the forefront of science, and also encryption is about being cool.
And I mean, their company's tradition is that.
Exactly. I mean, it's being cool as part of the product.
They invented the PC, right?
Yes, and that's a good thing. I don't mind. And also, like, I can see young people who kind of communicate to their love, darling, we have pizza tonight, and they want to be secure against eavesdropping.
Yeah.
And why? There's no reason. It's just cool.
Yeah.
And from a marketing perspective, that's a legitimate thing. The point I'm trying to make is that security is a multifaceted thing, and there's also psychological things coming in. Mm-hmm. And feeling secure in an increasingly insecure world may be something that has some value, even if the objective security is not.
But I would argue even this notion that young people who just want to say to their spouse or their love, they want to order pizza. I do think that more and more younger generations are terminally online, right? So everything they do their whole life, especially like younger generations, like 15, 14. I personally don't have many like touching barriers or something. I don't have many friends in that kind of age group. My sister is 18, so I know a little bit about it. Mm-hmm. And those people, they were born when the iPhone was already there.
Yeah.
So they don't know about modems and connecting with the.
I mean, I was around. I mean, as a kid, I was programming the C64 computer.
So they don't know
in
about
assembly
this.
language.
They already know the technology world for them is they were born into the iPhone, right? So for them, I think they are much more aware about personal data, security, adversary nation states which might hack you, which might, like, I think they are much more aware of that since their whole life is in this layer of technology, right?
Yeah.
And I think for them, it will become increasingly more important how secure communication is, since also this security is not just in the field of communication, but everywhere in banking, in whatever you touch basically is digital today. And I think that's why the interest and the demand is massive.
Totally, but right. But let me add 3 things to the. The first thing is what we said, namely there's a strong psychological component to this, and then the young generation is growing up in a world where security matters.
Yeah.
I recently had an interesting discussion with, maybe an anecdote if I have the time.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Not so long ago, I was. Actually, I was out with Seth Lloyd in Berlin. It was late. I get up at 4 every morning to get my work done, but I was delayed. I was like retired. I was super late. I went back by cab, and then the taxi driver tricked me. He said on whether I want a receipt or something. He was asking stupid questions, and at some point I said, please, I mean, leave me alone. And then I just went home. And later it turned out that the guy had tricked me into this, had broken into the iPhone and followed a procedure of how to close the Find My app and breaking into my iCloud and really completely impersonated me. Until today, I didn't find out how that happened and why. Anyway, there was a guy breaking into all my data I have. So
just because of a cab drive.
Yeah. So right. And this is kind of interesting. I mean, this is a threat, and I think people are increasingly aware of the significance of their data. And that, I mean, of course, I was super careless. I mean, that's not a big advertisement, but I think that adds to your point that people are aware of that. Mm-hmm. Another quick anecdote is I was recently talking to someone working for a bank, and then he told me that there was some security leak for some internet banking found, and they did patch it in the next software version. Yeah. But until that happened, what they did is they ramped up the insurance policy. I said, what? But apparently there was the better fix for the problem than immediately jumping on the software. Yeah,
that's one of the risks I kind of see is, to add to that point, is in industry or the private sector, just because you need to do something or it will be the right thing to do, the decision-making process doesn't really revolve around it. It often revolves around profitability. And
so it's hard to that adds some aspect to the question. And then there's also some secrets that are just important even in retrospect. Yeah. Let me take a German example. I don't want to become political, but there was this guy that was shot at the end of the 60s by a policeman that kind of turned the student movement into a violent movement. That quite a detrimental. Well, and we are seeing this is a long story, but it had a big impact onto Western German political culture.
We are seeing those things happening also today in other countries.
Right, but then the guy doing the shooting later turned up on the payroll of the Eastern German Secret Service. Many years later, I don't know, more than 2 decades later, he showed up on the payroll. Why am I saying that? Well, there's some things that even in retrospect are funny. You say, wait, that gives the whole story a bit of a new flavor. Of course. And once we can break RSA encryption, there will be some things coming out. We say, oh, that's very interesting. Yeah. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is a quite weak one, which is I'm not the right person to answer this question comprehensively, but I can see that there's many aspects coming in, and it's very difficult to assess what security means for our future world, but we are better prepared for it from a technological and mathematical perspective.
That is a good way to end, I think, the talk. Thank you so much for joining. That was incredible. I would love to speak for hours more, especially about encryption, but I think we have to cut it now. And thank you so much.